This was one of Europe's major railheads, crisscrossed by train tracks that led from all the major European cities. And yet it was hidden away in the rolling Polish countryside, unknown and unseen. At this place, children did not survive. Most were instantly sent to their death, minutes after stepping on the platform at this final destination. Most children, but not all. This is the story of the twins of Auschwitz and the experiments they endured at the hands of Josef Mengele. At a time when human life was reduced to a number and scientific fact gave way to a perverted political belief, in a place of horror.
Geht still, weint Wind, azoi kiel, azoi licht, tarfat sin, kein schum Ziel. Ach, ich will sein a Kind, mit Bett, mit Skelett, wie mit Seid, und mein Blut fließt barut wie die Zeit. Geht still, weint Wind, azoi kiel, azoi licht, tarfat sin, kein schum Ziel. Ach, ich will sein a Kind, mit Bett, mit Skelett, wie mit Seid, und mein Blut fließt barut wie die Zeit. Auf jener Seite ist die Sonne schon vergangen. Auf jener Seite ist ein Mädel gegangen, mit Bänkschaft in Herzen und Tränen in Blick, zu suchen ihre Mädelchen Glück. Und Limmerlach Bläuinke 7x7 hat sie bei dem Teig von Livonne geklieben und hat mit dem Strom sie verlassen in Teig, schön bleib meine Limmerlach bleib.
Michael.
Bye,
Thank you.
Retired Canadian businessman Leo Lowi is a twin. He and his twin sister were born in the Jewish quarter of the tiny village of Beregove in what today is Ukraine. In 1944, Leo and his twin sister were 14 years old, and Beregove was part of Hungary.
We heard rumors about Jews being treated very badly in other parts of the world. And in my immediate family, my father's brother was taken to a place called Kamenets-Podolsk and with his family because he didn't have the proper papers, and they shot him into a ditch.
It's a matter of trying to find out what my heritage is, knowing about the Holocaust, seeing it in books and films, and wanting to know what is my story, what is my father's story, and where do we come from, what's our background, who are we, and Dad would never really tell us.
Leo never thought he would be back and have the opportunity. Most people wouldn't, this is not a vacation, and most people would not take the time to travel to retrace his steps.
My father's been on a journey that most of us couldn't imagine. And I think maybe that's some of the spirit that's coming through here, is that we are meeting the spiritual roots of our existence.
The journey of the twins of the Holocaust begins with the dawning of the 20th century. Many countries of the world, including the United States and Canada, were giving serious consideration to the new and increasingly popular scientific theory, eugenics. Defined by the dictionary as the science of improving the human population by controlled breeding for desirable inherited characteristics.
So the argument for that was at the time that if you don't do anything, those of mediocre value will get more and more, and culture will disappear from Europe and the USA.
In Germany, in 1927, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology, Human Heredity and Eugenics was established in Berlin. Its first president calls for laws forcing sterilization of mentally ill persons. But Germany lacks the political will to do so. Until Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party assumed the reins of power in Germany. Hitler's goal to create a pure Aryan race was the perfect platform for the eugenicists to realize their goal. In this, political will had met scientific principle.
The Nazis told the eugenicists, okay, we will give you a law which allows that, which the other parties would never have done. And you have to accept our anti-Semitism, yeah.
On July 14, 1933, after being in power only 6 months, the law for the prevention of progeny with hereditary defects was proclaimed by the Nazis. It allowed for the compulsory sterilization of those the eugenicists considered valueless. All around the world, eugenics was being used as a political tool to preach prejudice as scientific fact. In the USA, eugenicists helped pass laws prohibiting interracial marriage. In Germany, this same principle helped to create a series of anti-Semitic laws that left Jews with virtually no rights at all.
As time went on, they lost their tiny rights one after the other. You know, they could not sit down on certain banks, they were not allowed to take the streetcar, they were not, and all this being legalized step for step for step for step, so that at the end obviously nothing was left, yeah. Absolutely nothing was left, and if nothing is left, then the word valueless fits perfect, yeah.
And in 1938, the Nazis orchestrated an overt move against the Jewish population Hitler had decreed as valueless.
In the fall of 1938, the Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, who was being left out of this orderly legal persecution, in a sense makes a bid to have a share of the pie, and he instigates what we call the Kristallnacht riot. All the synagogues in Germany are burned down in one night, Jewish windows are smashed, the shops are vandalized, several hundred Jews are killed, 30,000 men are arrested and taken off to the camps. And this was a very troubling event then for many Germans, that they had this conflict between their loyalty and admiration of Hitler and the Nazis, but they also strongly held to values about law and order, the sanctity of property, that you certainly don't violate houses of worship, even if they are Jewish. And as a result, in a sense, the Nazis pulled back. They would get rid of their Jews, but it wouldn't be done by riots in the streets.
In 1939, as the Nazis struggled to find a solution to the Jewish question, coincidentally, sterilization of the mentally ill came to a halt, and a more cost-effective method was authorized by Hitler. Codenamed T4, this would be Germany's first trial at ridding themselves of those they considered of no value.
They explained it as euthanasia, which in fact it was not. It was just killing. It was killing of mentally ill persons. Questionnaires had been sent to the asylums for mentally ill, and if they were not able to work, National Socialists thought that they were not worth living on. And so the physicians had to fill it out very carefully, and if they marked a cross in one corner of this questionnaire, that meant death to the person. Then those persons were sent to certain killing centers all over Germany at that time. They arrived with special buses. They had to undress, and they were measured, their weight was taken, and after that, undressed as they were just sent to the gas chambers. 80 to 120 people were packed into such a gas chamber and then killed with carbon monoxide under supervision of the physician.
I'll have to stop and ask somebody that speaks the language I can speak to explain to me where the main street is, because our street fed off of that street, okay?
I've always wanted to have that more loving family and, and be able to go out and throw the ball with Dad and, the weekend journeys or the holidays. This is the first time that our family has been on a trip together, and I'm 42.
Dort wie groß sind seine Netz, dort steht der kleine Ziffer. Kommen Mädlich ziehen Wester mit ihren Arena. Unter Sonne wie weiße Bilder wachsen Kelben großen Sorg. Und in der Waldkeit von die Sterne tanzen Jagden in der Horde.
And what really made it 1,000% sure was the oven in the bedroom. That clay, freestanding oven that you feed and it heats the room. I went to the room, and lo and behold, there is the stove, the clay stove. After a nice Sabbath lunch, we would go in there, and the whole family would congregate there, and this was heated up from Friday, so it was projecting a lot of heat, without the lights being on, having little sing-songs. That border around it, that's new, but this is definitely the material used. Wer kann ihn von mir, wer hin soll ihr gehen? Es ist verschlossen jede Tür.
They were so happy to see us because we actually made the minyan. We need minimum 10 for a minyan. And after the service, they came up to us and told us that of the 8,000 Jews that were taken from Beregove, only 4 returned.
This gentleman remembers my parents, my family. He's 78 years old.
And in that golden summer of 1939, the world held its breath on the brink of war. Soon the Nazis' racial pseudoscience would provide not only the rationale, but also the mechanical means for Hitler's final solution to the Jews of Europe. By the end of 1939, Germany had conquered Poland, and the T4 Euthanasia program was in full operation. Eugenics continued to give scientific validity to even the most absurd of Nazi ideas on race hygiene. In Berlin in 1942, a new director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute was appointed, the internationally respected geneticist Ottmar von Verschuur.
Mengele had been a postdoc when Verschuur was still professor in Frankfurt, and he was regarded then as one of the top young guys in his institute. But then came the war, and he got involved in warfare and got wounded, and then he came back in January 43 to Verschuur, who now had become director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology in Berlin. So then he joined the institute.
The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute gave the Nazis a pseudo-scientific basis for their anti-Semitic legislation. They were also interested in twins as a genetic anomaly.
Twins give interesting results, yeah. then as now, yeah. So at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, this was the top place for twin research.
It was believed that twins might unlock the secrets of our genetic makeup. As Europe began to fall to the Nazi war machine, Jewish emigration was cut off, and instead, Jews were ordered into walled and isolated ghettos.
We are identical twins. We're very, very close one to another. We did not play, we did not laugh. We were anxious, we were strained, and we are hungry. People died of hunger, gradually. Every morning, walking on the streets, one could see the people who died the night before. People died not only of starvation, illnesses broke out, like typhus, like dysentery. They brought them all in a common grave on the cemetery of Lowi. They put them all together.
Jews had been reduced virtually to non-people, dehumanized and degraded.
In the latter half of 1941, with victory in Europe on all fronts, the numbers of Jews coming under Nazi control kept rising. It is then that they began to recognize that murdering Jews was the only practical way to achieve their goal of racial purity. Under the direction of Heinrich Himmler, a final solution to the so-called Jewish question was put into action by SS Security Chief Reinhard Heydrich at a conference of anthropologists and state bureaucrats, including those who were running the T4 Euthanasia killing centers. This top-secret conference was held in the Berlin suburb of Wannsee.
Right after the Wannsee conference in January 1942, the staff of the T4 organization, more than 100 men, were sent to the east, and they were the organizers. They formed the bureaucracy of the first killing camps in the east.
What they did is put together elements of plans they already had experience with. That is, they already had euthanasia and they knew how to kill with gas. They already had concentration camps where they knew you could do things in greater secrecy, particularly if these camps were located in Poland as opposed to Germany. And they already had ethnic cleansers, people who rounded people up and put them on trains. So the plan that I think that crystallizes by the fall is to create concentration camps in Poland, equip them with gas chambers, round up Jews all over Europe, put them on trains, ship them to these camps, and murder them on an assembly line basis.
And so the degeneration is complete, and the threads have come together that weave a monstrous fabric. The Nazis managed to dehumanize Jews to such an extent that it was possible to consider them as nothing more than vermin requiring extermination. With this dehumanization came an unprecedented opportunity for the German scientific community.
It suddenly seemed to be possible and feasible to do experiments, and in fact the Mengele experiment started in late 43.
One morning we were woke around 5 o'clock in the morning and heard it out in the street, and we were told that we can only take one little package of whatever it is out with us. And it was a Hungarian gendarme with the big feathers in their hats. They marched us into this brick factory. We stayed there between 8 and 10 days. We were awakened and we were put into the cattle cars. It didn't matter whether families were broken up, and we were just shoved in like sardines.
I don't know, 80, 90, 100, until it was fully packed. The cattle car door was sealed with a lever that went over it. And between each two cattle cars, there was a platform with a guard, ready with his machine gun should anybody try to escape.
There was no possibility of turning around or sitting down or laying down or do anything. No sanitary facilities, no water, no preparation, nothing for traveling for 3 days.
When the train would stop, we would ask the guard by our cattle car for water. He would say 5 gold watches. We would gather gold watches, 5 gold watches, and pass it through a little tiny barbed wire window at the top. Then he would take a bucket of water and throw it in through that same window. It was an interesting exercise in futility.
I just can't believe that this was it. Just touching it gives me the shakes.
They were not adults when they were packed into the suffocating cattle cars. They were children. Eva Moses and her twin sister were 9. Yona Lax and her twin sister were 14. Leo Lowi and his twin sister were 15 years of age, soon to be delivered into the hands of Yosef Mengele. Medical experimentation on human beings considered valueless was first tried by Germany at the turn of the century in her African colonies. The black native population was incarcerated in concentration camps and then killed by the thousands as the German pharmaceutical industry tested possible vaccines for sleeping sickness, all in spite of a law passed in 1900 prohibiting human testing.
Und so wie ich bin verspielte und stellen sich vor dein Blick. Mein Gott, mein Herr, mein Beschaffer, leiter mich aus in dein Schein. Und lieg ich vor dir auf Wolken, verwieg mich und schläfer mich ein.
Welcome to Auschwitz.
Verleisten die Schich und dem Treue und kommen zu dir zurück. Und so wie ich bin verspielte und stellen sich vor dein Blick. Mein Gott, mein Herr, mein Beschaffer, leiter mich aus.
When we saw that sign, Arbeit macht frei, we thought it was our liberation, but it was the contrary.
The translation is, work makes you free.
Now it looks so small, so tiny, so not impressive. In my mind, it was always that the gate was huge, ever so big, and it was unbelievable.
They opened the doors, they started hollering to jump down. For the 2.5 days not being able to move or to stand or to sit, you were numb. You were falling out of the cars and being picked up. And with the dogs barking and hollering and whatnot, it was bedlam.
Everything moved very, very fast. It was speed of light. And maybe it was no more than like 10 minutes when I looked around and trying to figure out in my childish curiosity what that place was, when I realized that my father and my 2 older sisters have disappeared in the crowd. And I tried to search for them with my eyes, but I could not find them.
Most of the SS on the ramp were drunk to protect themselves from the horrors of everything that went on.
All of a sudden, Mengele appeared, and all the SS men were standing in front of us. He had a little stick in his hand, and he started selecting. Without any interest, said, left, right, left, right, left, right. And he ordered me to go to the left. And I started walking towards the crematorium. That sister of mine, my eldest, she fell on the ground. and she begged Mengele. She didn't know it was Mengele. She said, the two children are twins. They've never before been departed. Please let them be together.
Didn't kiss them, we didn't have a chance to say goodbye. That was it. Because when they came hollering twins, this one that pointed to us, we were yanked out, and before I knew it, I was in a van.
As we were standing with my mother in SS, was running toward us, yelling in German, twins. We did not volunteer any information.
I was brought back, and I was joined together with my twin sister and Hanka, the big sister. Hannah was very happy about it. And so one of the people standing there over there in the ditch said, don't be so happy. Mengele took it for a purpose. He's performing experiments on twins.
He approached us. Miriam and I were dressed alike and we looked very much alike, and he demanded to know if we were twins. And again, my poor mother didn't know what to say. And she asked hesitantly, is that good? And the SS nodded yes. At that moment, my mother, still not really knowing what that would mean, she said very hesitantly yes. And other SS came. We were pulled in one direction. My mother was pulled in the opposite direction. We were crying. She was crying. I remember looking back and seeing my mother's arms stretched out in despair as she was led away. I never even said goodbye to her. But of course I didn't know that this would be the last time that we would see her. All that took no more than 30 minutes from the time we got down from the cattle car. Miriam and I no longer had a family.
According to Jewish inmate pathologist Dr. Miklos Nisli, twins provided Mengele with a perfect experimental specimen. One twin could serve as the control, while the other endured the experiment. The twins had escaped the fate of so many others, and now they waited, held in segregated barracks away from the general population. Boys in one barrack, girls in another, waiting for Mengele, the man who was known in Auschwitz-Birkenau as the Angel of Death.
Mengele is coming! We would straighten out like little soldiers with our hands behind our back.
Whenever he came into the barrack, we were afraid even to look at him, because we were afraid that they may choose us for the same day for the experiments.
Gorgeous, elegant-looking man, and definitely made an impression how he entered. And he would just go from bed to bed and count to see how many guinea pigs he had today.
It was constant fear of what tomorrow will bring, and praying for the day to be gone, that you are not singled out to go.
Most of the SS doctors at Auschwitz-Birkenau were involved in experimentation on the prisoner population.
But the center thing was the latrine.
But the research on the Mengele twins was set apart from the adult experiments.
He had two PhDs. He had a medical PhD, and he had, in fact, a non-medical PhD. So if he wanted to make a career in a German university, he needed what is called a Habilitation. That is a second kind of PhD. And this was obviously what he was thinking about and what he was collecting material for while in Auschwitz. Yeah.
There were these 3 dead children who I saw the night before in the latrine. They were put back in their beds. And Mengele stopped by their bed and yelled at the supervisor, "Why did you permit these children to die?" And everybody was trembling, And I was very confused as time went on. I knew that many of the children were taken to Mengele's labs and they disappeared. So why was he so upset that these died? I just learned a very important lesson, that to be a Mengele twin meant that only Mengele could kill us. No one else dared touch us.
There was one situation where I went out on a workforce with 3 other guys and a pull cart. 2 German soldiers, drunks, came with a cane and they took us into an empty room and they started beating the other guys, and I kept on going to the back. And finally, when it came to me, I just hollered out, blurted out his name, and it was like blurting out God's name, you know. These guys froze, and they just hollered at me, "Get out."
There had been a long suspicion that there was a connection between Mengele and the professor von Verschuer, who was director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology. But there was no real hard proof. The hard proof came when I discovered in 1980 the records and the reports of von Verschuer, where he writes that his former postdoc, Mengele, his collaborator, was working for a particular project in Auschwitz.
They were comparing the color of the eyes.
Your fingernails, your creases in your fingers.
We would sit for 6 to 8 hours naked. Every part of my body was measured, compared to charts, compared to my twin sister. Every movement I made was noted. These experiments were not dangerous, but they were unbelievably demeaning.
The gathering of data on twins was not confined to external features. Twins would be forced to lie on separate tables and then murdered at the same time, so that the weight and measurements of their internal organs might be compared in the same manner as their external features.
Probably nowhere else in the world did a scientist have the possibility to practice genetic research on twins, where they could be killed and autopsied to see what happened internally.
As far as I know, the twin research performed at Auschwitz was as useless as it could be. What were they doing? They were looking for twins with heterochromatic eyes, with different eye colors, killing them, taking their eyes out, sending their eyes to Berlin, to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology and Genetic Research.
Since they had to die anyhow, he could arrange their murder and that their eyes were sent to the institute.
There are many unsubstantiated rumors regarding the purpose of Mengele's experiments, that he was trying to increase the incidence of twin birth, that he made attempts to join 2 twins into a single Siamese twin, that he attempted incestuous impregnations, but no substantial proof exists that any of those things ever happened.
They examined the body's defense system, and I believe that this is precisely the basis and interest of the Mengele twin experiments.
A minimum of 5 injections 3 times a week.
In some cases, those injections had a side effect, sometimes for me, sometimes for her, sometimes for both of us.
After one of those injections, I became very ill. I developed a very high fever. My arms and legs were swollen, and I had these huge red patches all over my arms and legs. They were very painful. Mengele looked at my fever chart, laughing sarcastically. Too bad. She's so young. She has only 2 weeks to live.
We wouldn't give any help to people who didn't feel well. No, it's on the contrary. He wanted to leave it as it is, just to see naturally what is happening.
We received no food, no water, no medication, or nothing. would I have died? Mengele would have rushed Miriam to his lab, killed her, and then do the comparative autopsies.
They had the idea that Ashkenazi Jews had more defense enzymes against tuberculosis than non-Ashkenazi Jews. And this, if true, this would be very exciting because one could isolate the defense enzymes, one could use them as medicamentation against tuberculosis and so on and so on. So they got extremely excited about this idea.
This came from the notion, from the idea that the Jewish population, especially in the East, was in a way acquainted to typhoid fever, to typhus. So they thought that there could be probably a protein component in the Jewish blood that could prevent from infectious diseases.
But the insiders then already knew that the defense enzymes were a hoax. They were a fraud. They did not exist.
In spite of the certain knowledge that what they were searching for did not exist, the experiments on the twins continued as research for Mengele's thesis, and so that the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute could continue to receive funding from its Nazi puppet masters.
The people who were very closely involved with the terrible things the SS did, particularly in terms of medical experiments, they had very little chance of surviving. That was a sentence of death.
We had no father, no mother. He, in some little way, replaced that protection that a father would provide, because he did not let anybody ever touch us.
They call him the angel of death, and in my case, he saved my life and he saved a few others. But that was not his intent. He was just not given enough time to achieve what he set out to do.
Today, we believe that approximately 3,000 twins came into the hands of Josef Mengele at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Only 258 survived. On October the 30th, 1944, the last deportation train arrived in Auschwitz as the Russian army was rapidly advancing through Poland.
My mother, who was a child at the time, was an important witness because she told me that she cannot say exactly when, but presumably in 1944, Mengele was at my grandfather's place for a visit. She was only able to tell from a child's perspective that from what she remembered, something dramatic took place because everyone was walking around with tears in their eyes.
The twins have no particular memory of the experiments ending or of the last time they saw Josef Mengele. It is only today that we know that he disappeared from Auschwitz sometime in November of 1944.
I'll never forget the day I spotted the first Russian soldier in camouflage gear.
We ran up to them and hugged them and kissed them and thanked them. And we were jumping up and down. We are free, we are free. We have survived. I have forgiven the Nazis. Forgiveness does not say that what they have done is right. All it says that I am healed inside. I am no longer a prisoner of my tragic past.
A lot of people say that, well, that's enough already. It's 60 years ago. Forget it. We can't forget it. While we are here, and I can claim that I have no family left other than my own immediate. No parents, no grandparents, no uncles, no aunts. That's why we bring these kids here, to see where their grandparents would be now, in ashes. And so that's all there is to it. And my father, may rest in peace wherever he is, he wanted one, and we got one. And we had one in our room. And that's exactly what it looked like, same type of tiles in a brown color.
It was the first time that I'd ever seen him cry throughout the entire trip.
Just brings back memories of when I was little.
And it really brought it home for me of what he had lost and what he had endured on his journey.
Eva Moses and her sister Miriam hid in a deserted barrack with others until they were liberated by the Russian army in January of 1945. Miriam died in 1993. Eva lives in the United States. In the bitter cold of January 1945, the SS forced Jona Lax, her sister, and thousands of other prisoners on a death march from Poland to Germany. Jona and her sister survived and returned to Lodz in May, where they were reunited with their older sister, Hannah. Jona lives in Tel Aviv, and her twin sister, who is also named Miriam, lives in Vienna. Leo Lowi's twin sister was reunited with 3 of their older sisters during the death march, and together they survived and were liberated in Germany. But overzealous and compassionate American frontline soldiers, untrained in the effects of starvation, overfed the survivors. And within a week, Leo's older sisters died of dysentery, as his twin sister watched helplessly. You see, as a Mengele twin, she had received better treatment and had been better able to handle the change in diet. She and Leo were reunited in Budapest 2 months later, and she lived in Canada until her death in November of 1998. Her name was also Miriam.
The story of my grandfather reveals how susceptible science is to politics, how susceptible science is to money and economic influence, simply because science will not function without money. Power, jealousy, and animosity quickly overstep the ethical boundaries of science.
Josef Mengele was never brought to justice. He slipped out of Europe and is reported to have died in Brazil in 1979. Following the war, the Allied government fined Ottmar von Verschuur 600 marks for his connection to the Nazi Party, but otherwise he was never prosecuted. He died in 1969, an honored and respected scientist. In 1999, the Max Planck Society, the heir apparent to the former Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, found in its possession letters that may shed light on the extent of their involvement in the twins' testing and experimentations at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Initially, they restricted any and all access to these letters. Recently, however, bowing to public pressure, they have agreed to release them to a select committee of their own choosing. Yet still, its board of governors continue to deny that the story of the Mengele twins is in any way a part of its past. It is presumed that the data from the experiments performed on the twins was destroyed or was taken by Josef Mengele when he fled Poland in the cold autumn of 1944. To this day, many of the surviving twins suffer immunological problems that may be related to the experiments they endured. They have repeatedly asked that anyone with further knowledge of the experiments come forward to help them understand as adults what they suffered as children. But as yet, no one has. At the time that this film was made, there are 98 twins still waiting.
Mein Schwester Chaye mit de grüne Augen, Mein Schwester Chaye mit der schwarze Zepp. Die Schwester Chaye, was hat mich der Zeugen aufs Motsche Gas in Haus mit krumme Trepp. Die Mame ist weg von Stubaginnen, wenn auf den Himmel hat erst kaum Geld. Sie ist weg in Kromareien verdienen, das biedne drobne Grosche dicke Geld. Und der Chaye ist geblieben mit den Brüdern, und sie hat sie gekormet und gehielt. Und sie pflegte singen, sie die schöne Lieder, vor Nacht, wenn kleine Kinder werden mild. Meine Schwester Chaye mit den grünen Augen, meine Schwester Chaye mit den langen Haaren. Die Schwester Chaye, was hat mich der Zeugen, ist noch nicht alt gewesen, endlich Jahr. Sie hat geräumt, gekocht, erlangt das Essen. Sie hat gezwungen uns die kleine Kämpfe. Noch spielen sich mit uns, hat sie vergessen. Die Schwester Chaye